alien plague, accidentally unlocks humanity's god-tier psychic powers. The sterile walls of the Terran Medical Research Facility hummed with a frequency that seemed to penetrate Dr. Thomas Burns' very bones. 3 months. 3 months since the Zephyrian delegation had arrived with promises of galactic brotherhood, advanced technology, and a future among the stars. 3 months since everything went catastrophically, irreversibly wrong. Thomas pressed his palm against the reinforced glass separating him from Ward 7, watching the patients within. They sat in perfect circles, 37 individuals who no longer moved with the chaotic independence that had once defined humanity. Their breathing synchronized. Their blinks occurred in unison. When one turned their head, the others followed with mechanical precision. "Still think you can cure them?" Dr. Sarah Chen's voice carried the exhaustion that had settled over Earth's scientific community like a shroud. She joined him at the observation window, her reflection ghostly in the polarized surface. "Cure?" Thomas's laugh held no humor. The word felt primitive, inadequate. "Sarah, what if we're asking the wrong question entirely?" The Zephyrian plague, as the media had branded it, had struck within hours of first contact. Ambassador Krell's species possessed an ethereal beauty that had captivated humanity. Translucent skin revealing flowing bioluminescent patterns, voices that seemed to harmonize with cosmic frequencies, and minds that operated on levels of consciousness humans could barely comprehend. They had come in peace, they claimed. They had come to elevate lesser species to galactic civilization. Instead, they had brought contamination. The infection spread through proximity, through shared air, through the mere presence of the Zephyrians themselves. Not a virus or bacterium, but something far more insidious, a quantum-level pathogen that rewrote neural pathways, that dissolved the barriers between individual consciousness and collective thought. Within a week, 40% of Earth's population had been exposed. Within a month, the Galactic Council had imposed total quarantine. Humanity was declared a failed experiment, a species too primitive to join galactic society. The infected were considered lost, their free will, that sacred cornerstone of sentient rights, utterly destroyed. But Thomas had begun to suspect something else entirely. He pulled up the latest neural scans on his tablet, data streams cascading across the screen in patterns that defied conventional medical understanding. "Look at this, Sarah. The theta wave patterns, they're not degrading. They're synchronizing across multiple subjects simultaneously. And these gamma spikes." He zoomed in on a particularly complex segment. "They're occurring in brain regions we've never seen active before." Sarah frowned, her dark eyes scanning the incomprehensible data. "Regions that shouldn't exist, you mean? The human brain doesn't have neural pathways in those areas." "Doesn't it?" Thomas's voice dropped to a whisper. "Or did we simply never access them?" Through the glass, one of the infected, a former astrophysicist named Maria Santos, slowly turned to look directly at him. Her eyes, once brown, now held flecks of silver that seemed to pulse with their own inner light. She smiled, and somehow, impossibly, Thomas felt that smile resonate in his own mind like an echo in a vast cathedral. The next morning brought news that shattered what remained of Earth's hope. Ambassador Krell's communication arrived through official diplomatic channels, broadcast simultaneously to every government on the planet. The Zephyrian's image materialized in the emergency session of the Terran Council, his luminescent patterns flickering with what their cultural attachés had learned to recognize as disgust. "People of Earth," his harmonious voice carried undertones of cosmic sorrow, "we have monitored your condition for these past months. The corruption spreads unchecked. Your infected no longer think as individuals. They have become something antithetical to all galactic law." President Martinez leaned forward in her chair, her face etched with the weight of leading a dying world. "Ambassador Krell, surely there must be some treatment, some way to reverse." "There is no reversal." The aliens' patterns flashed crimson. "The infected have lost their fundamental nature. They are no longer truly sentient by galactic standards. We will not risk contamination of other species. Earth's quarantine is now permanent. The transmission ended, leaving only the soft hum of electronic equipment and the sound of President Martinez's quiet sobbing. But in Ward 7, something extraordinary was beginning to unfold. Thomas had taken to sleeping in his office, unable to leave the facility as reports filtered in from around the globe. The infected weren't dying. They weren't degenerating. If anything, they seemed to be thriving in ways that challenged every assumption about human consciousness. He was reviewing sleep deprivation hallucinations, at least, that's what he told himself when he heard it. Singing. 37 voices raised in perfect harmony, but the melody was unlike anything ever composed by human hands. It seemed to bend reality around itself, each note hanging in the air like visible light. Racing toward 7, Thomas found the infected standing in a complex geometric pattern, their movements flowing like a choreographed dance of infinite precision. But more than that, objects in the room were moving. Pens floated in slow spirals. Computer screens displayed images of distant galaxies that the room's isolated systems had no way of accessing. The very air seemed to shimmer with potential energy. Maria Santos stepped forward from the group, her silver-flecked eyes meeting his through the glass. When she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that resonated in his bones, and somehow he understood every word despite her mouth never moving. "We are not lost, Dr. Byrne, we are found." The revelation struck him like a physical blow. The infection wasn't destroying human consciousness. It was unleashing something that had been dormant since the species' earliest days, something that the Zephyrians, in their rigid adherence to individual sentience, couldn't comprehend. "Your ancestors knew this gift," Maria's mental voice continued, and suddenly Thomas was flooded with images. Shamans in prehistory reaching across vast distances with their minds, ancient civilizations that moved mountains through collective will, knowledge that had been systematically suppressed and forgotten as humanity developed technology to replace what they had lost. The plague did not change us. It simply awakened what we always were. Over the following weeks, Thomas documented everything. Neural patterns that suggested quantum entanglement between infected individuals, instances of shared memory across vast distances, collective problem-solving that produced solutions to mathematical theorems that had puzzled humanity for centuries. The infected weren't becoming less human, they were becoming more human than ever before. But even as Thomas's understanding grew, the world outside continued its inexorable slide toward despair. Food production collapsed as infected agricultural workers abandoned their posts to gather in strange configurations. Communication networks failed as infected technicians simply walked away from their responsibilities. Governments blamed the plague for humanity's apparent surrender to hopelessness. They couldn't see what Thomas saw. The infected weren't abandoning human society. They were building something new. The first sign came from the Australian quarantine zone, where 10,000 infected had gathered in the outback. Satellite imagery showed them arranged in a spiral pattern spanning 50 kilometers, their positions shifting in response to some invisible cosmic rhythm. But what truly defied explanation was the effect on the surrounding environment. The desert was blooming. Plants that had never existed in Australia's harsh interior now flourished in impossible abundance. Water bubbled up from previously barren ground. The very air in the region showed atmospheric composition, changes that shouldn't have been possible without massive technological intervention. Similar reports emerged from every continent. The infected weren't just developing psychic abilities. They were reshaping reality itself through collective will. President Martinez authorized Thomas to make direct contact with the infected communities, despite the risk of contamination. As he approached the Australian gathering, escorted by military personnel in full hazmat gear, he felt something shift in his own consciousness. a gentle presence at the edge of his awareness, welcoming, curious, infinitely compassionate. "You may join us if you choose," Maria's voice echoed in his mind, though she was thousands of kilometers away. "But first, you must help them understand." Them. The galaxy fears us because they cannot comprehend us. They see collective consciousness as death of self, but we are not a hive mind as they imagine. We are a symphony of individual notes creating harmony impossible for any single voice. The infected around him smiled in unison, and Thomas felt tears streaming down his face as understanding flooded through him. They hadn't lost their individuality. They had transcended the illusion that individuality required separation. Each person remained themselves while simultaneously becoming part of something infinitely greater. "Show them," Thomas thought, and the response came not just from Maria, but from every infected human on Earth, their voices blending into a cosmic chorus that made the air itself sing with possibility. 6 months after first contact, Ambassador Krell received a transmission that made his bioluminescent patterns flicker with confusion. The signal originated from Earth, but not from any known human technology. It seemed to emerge from the planet itself, carried on quantum frequencies that suggested impossible levels of technological sophistication. Ambassador Krell. The voice belonged to Dr. Thomas Byrne, but it carried harmonics that spoke of thousands of minds working in concert. "We request permission to address the Galactic Council." "Impossible." Krell's patterns flashed angry red. "Earth remains under absolute quarantine. The infected cannot be allowed to spread their contamination." "We are not contaminated, Ambassador. We have awakened." The transmission shifted, and suddenly Krell found himself viewing Earth from orbit. But this wasn't any satellite imagery he recognized. The perspective moved with fluid grace through space, showing him things no camera could capture. The planet's magnetic field dancing with new energies, the atmosphere itself restructured to better support life, and across the surface, geometric patterns of human activity that suggested coordination on a truly planetary scale. "What have you become?" The question escaped Krell before he could stop it. "We have become what we always had the potential to be. What your species, in your fear of losing individual consciousness, could never risk attempting." More images flowed through the transmission. Cities rising from nothing as infected humans shaped matter through collective will. Diseases being cured by groups of medical professionals sharing their knowledge directly mind to mind. Environmental restoration occurring at impossible speeds, as thousands of consciousness focused their intent on healing their world. "The plague you brought us didn't destroy our free will, Ambassador. It revealed that true freedom comes not from isolation, but from connection, not from separation, but from unity that preserves the beauty of diversity." Krell's horror deepened as he realized the full implications. "You're asking to rejoin galactic society." "We're informing you that we will rejoin galactic society. The question is whether that rejoining will be as partners or as something you force us to become through your fear." The transmission ended, leaving Krell alone with the terrifying knowledge that humanity had not been broken by the plague. They had been transformed into something the galaxy had never seen, a species that had successfully bridged individual consciousness and collective power without sacrificing either. 3 days later, human ships appeared at the edge of Zephyrian space. They were unlike any vessels the galaxy had ever seen, grown rather than built, their hulls seeming to pulse with organic life while displaying technology that defied current understanding of physics. They moved through space with impossible grace, leaving trails of energy that sang with harmonious frequencies. Ambassador Krell stood on the observation deck of the primary Zephyrian diplomatic station, watching as a small human craft approached for docking. He had argued against allowing them aboard, but the Galactic Council had overruled him. Perhaps curiosity had overcome caution. Perhaps they, too, needed to understand what humanity had become. The airlock cycled, and Dr. Thomas Byrne stepped through, but he was changed. His eyes held the same silver flecks as the infected, and when he moved, it was with the fluid precision that spoke of perfect awareness of his place in the larger pattern. Behind him came Maria Santos and 12 others, each radiating the same sense of belonging to something greater than themselves. Ambassador Krell. Thomas's voice carried those impossible harmonics, but now Krell could hear the individual notes within the chorus, each person's unique contribution to the whole. Thank you for receiving us. You're all infected. Krell's patterns flickered with barely controlled fear. We are all awakened, Maria corrected gently, and we come with an offer. What followed challenged every assumption the galaxy held about consciousness, power, and the nature of sentient life itself. The humans demonstrated abilities that seemed to violate physical laws: matter manipulation through focused group intention, instantaneous communication across vast distances, shared problem-solving that produced solutions no individual mind could have conceived. But more than their abilities, it was their nature that truly unsettled the galactic community. They retained their individual personalities, their unique perspectives, their personal desires and dreams. Yet they could merge those individual streams into a collective river of consciousness that flowed with purpose no single mind could achieve. You call us infected, Thomas said during the formal presentation to the Galactic Council, his words reaching every species representative simultaneously through means they couldn't begin to understand. But infection implies damage, loss, degradation. Look at what we have accomplished. Images flowed through the council chamber. Earth restored to pristine beauty in mere months. Diseases that had plagued humanity for millennia eliminated through collective healing. Technologies developed through shared expertise that advanced human civilization by centuries in a matter of weeks. We offer partnership, not domination. We seek to share what we have learned, not to impose it upon those who choose a different path. But we will no longer accept quarantine based on your fear of what you do not understand. The debate that followed lasted for weeks. Some species demanded humanity's continued isolation, terrified that the infection might spread to their own populations. Others recognized the unprecedented opportunity to learn from a consciousness evolution that had succeeded where countless other species had failed. In the end, it was Ambassador Krell himself who cast the deciding vote. Standing before the assembled council, his bioluminescent patterns cycling through complex configurations of thought and emotion, he spoke with the weight of one who had witnessed the impossible. I came to Earth believing we were saving the galaxy from a contaminated species. I now understand that it is the galaxy that needs saving from our own limitations. The patterns across his skin shifted to colors the Zephyrians reserved for the most profound revelations. Humanity has achieved what we all secretly dream of: unity without loss of self, collective power without individual sacrifice. They offer to teach us what they have learned, knowing that in sharing this gift, they risk creating competitors who might one day challenge their newfound abilities. He paused, allowing the weight of his words to settle over the assembly. That is not the behavior of a contaminated species. That is the behavior of a species that has transcended the fear that keeps us all isolated in our separate forms of consciousness. The vote to lift Earth's quarantine passed by a single ballot, Krell's own. As the human delegation prepared to return to Earth, Krell found himself alone with Dr. Byrne in the diplomatic station's observation lounge. Through the transparent walls, Earth hung like a blue jewel in the void, but now Krell could see the energy patterns flowing around it, the signs of a world where consciousness and matter danced in harmony. You could have forced this outcome, Krell said quietly. Your abilities, we sense them even through our shields. You could have simply taken what you wanted. Thomas smiled, and for a moment, Krell glimpsed the individual human beneath the collective consciousness. a man who had dedicated his life to healing, who had chosen understanding over conquest even when faced with his species' potential extinction. Force would have proven your fears correct, Ambassador. We didn't seek to demonstrate our power. We sought to demonstrate our wisdom. And if the galaxy rejects your teachings, if we choose to remain as we are. The harmonics in Thomas's voice carried notes of infinite patience, cosmic acceptance. Then you remain as you are, and we continue as we have become. The universe is vast enough for many forms of consciousness to coexist. Krell's patterns shifted to configurations he had never displayed before, colors that spoke of wonder, of possibility, of hope for transcendence he had never dared imagine. And if some species choose to explore what you have discovered. Thomas's smile broadened, and suddenly Krell felt it, a gentle presence at the edge of his awareness, offering connection without demanding submission, suggesting unity without requiring surrender of self. Then we welcome you into the song, Ambassador. We welcome you home. As the human ships departed for Earth, carrying with them the promise of a new chapter in galactic civilization, Krell remained at the observation window. The stars seemed different now, not distant points of light in an empty void, but notes in a cosmic symphony waiting to be heard by minds willing to listen. On Earth, in hospitals and research centers across the globe, Dr. Thomas Byrne worked alongside his colleagues, both individual and collective, to document the transformation that had saved not just humanity, but perhaps all sentient life in the galaxy. The plague that had threatened to end human civilization had instead revealed its greatest gift, the understanding that consciousness was not a prison of individual experience, but a spectrum of connection that could span from solitary thought to universal harmony. Maria Santos, who had been among the first infected, now served as Earth's primary ambassador to species requesting guidance in consciousness evolution. Her office overlooked the Pacific Ocean, where massive cities now floated serenely above the waves, structures grown through collective intention, powered by harmonized thought, inhabited by humans who had learned to balance individual expression with collective purpose. "They're afraid," she said, reviewing the latest communications from the Andromedan Collective, a machine intelligence that had dominated their galaxy for millennia through pure logical unity. "They've achieved perfect collective thought, but they've lost all individual variation. They want to know if what we've learned can help them rediscover diversity within unity." Thomas, now showing the first traces of the silver patterns that marked the fully awakened, nodded thoughtfully. "Schedule a formal consultation, and include the Zephyrians in the planning committee. They understand the fear of losing individual consciousness better than most." Through the windows of their facility, they could see the daily miracle that Earth had become. Children played in gardens that grew according to their imagination, their young minds naturally finding the balance between self and community that had taken adults months to achieve. Artists collaborated on works that spanned continents, their individual visions merging into expressions of beauty no single consciousness could have conceived. Scientists shared knowledge directly, mind to mind, accelerating discovery and understanding at rates that made the previous centuries of human progress seem glacially slow. But perhaps most remarkably, conflict had not disappeared. Humans still disagreed, still competed, still struggled with the fundamental challenges of existence. The difference was that those conflicts now occurred within a framework of deep connection and mutual understanding. Arguments became collaborative problem-solving. Competition became cooperative enhancement. Individual desires found expression within collective harmony rather than in spite of it. The infection that Ambassador Krell had feared would destroy human free will had instead revealed that true freedom required not isolation, but the wisdom to choose connection. Not the absence of unity, but the strength to maintain individuality within cosmic harmony. As the sun set over the transformed Earth, casting golden light across cities that pulsed with living energy, Thomas felt the gentle presence of billions of minds, each unique, each precious, each contributing their individual note to a symphony that grew more beautiful with every voice that chose to join the song. Humanity had indeed returned from the voyage that began with quarantine and contamination. But like all true heroes in the greatest stories ever told, they had returned transformed, bearing gifts that would reshape not just their own world, but the entire galaxy's understanding of what it meant to be truly alive. The plague had ended, the awakening had begun. And in the vast concert hall of the universe, Earth's voice rose in harmonies that would echo across the stars for generations to come, teaching all who would listen that consciousness was not a burden to be borne alone, but a gift to be shared in the endless dance of individual and collective becoming. Thank you for listening.